The following edition of Jewish Insights with Justin Pines on JBS, with special guest Tzipi Livni, is made possible in part by Karen and Steve Pack and family.
Shalom and welcome to Jewish Insights. My guest today, Tzipi Livni, has served in 8 different cabinet positions under 3 different prime ministers, Ariel Sharon, Ehud Olmert, and Benjamin Netanyahu. Her positions have included Vice Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Minister of Justice. She has also been the official leader of the opposition. As Foreign Minister, Tzipi Livni led negotiations with the Palestinian Authority. She was a key government figure during Israel's disengagement from Gaza and during Hamas's subsequent takeover of Gaza. She was foreign minister during Israel's second Lebanon war and during Israel's operation to take out Syria's nuclear reactor. She began her service as a member of the Likud party, and then the Kadima party, and later the Hatnuah party and Zionist Union. In a world where politics sometimes have a bad name, she is known fondly by her supporters and international media as Mrs. Clean for her image as an honest politician. She is widely regarded as one of the most influential women in Israel since Golda Meir. And no major political figure has had more recent experience trying to negotiate a 2-state solution than Tzipi Livni. Thank you so much for being here. What a treat for us. Really appreciate it. And I said this offline, but before we say anything, I should say this to more guests, but I guess I should really say to you, thank you for your service. So it's not a small thing to devote yourself in that way to a country and to a people, so thank you to start.
Thank you for the possibility to share views and insights.
So before we talk about your career and before we talk about what's happened since October 7th, let's just hear a little bit about how you became Tzipi Livni. Tell us a little bit about your story. I know you have an interesting background and your parents.
Yes, I was born to what is called in Israel the fighting family, the family of those that were in the underground fighting for the establishment of the Jewish state in the land of Israel. So
the Irgun. Right?
The Irgun, okay. Yes. My father was the chief of operation. My mother was one of the warriors there. And they met in the best blind date ever, I think. They met while robbing a British money train. Okay. The guys stopped the train, took the money, and the women put the money in nylon socks and put it around their body with the long dresses. And later, both of them were arrested by the British government at the time. My father was in Accra prison, and he was in charge on bombing the prison from the inside and escaping with other friends from prison.
Wow. And
my mother was imprisoned in Bethlehem. It was a prisoner for women. And later she asked somebody to inject her milk to the muscles, and that created symptoms, high fever and so on. So they took her to a hospital. They thought that this is appendicitis. And when she was in the operation room, just before they entered to operate her, she jumped from the 2nd floor and escaped. So for many years,
This is like out of a movie. This is crazy.
So these are the stories that I grew up upon instead of Snow White or other
These are your bedtime
fairy
stories.
tales.
These are your bedtime stories. Oh my gosh.
And by the way, for many years I thought that the story of my mother, it's too much to be true, I think, until I've met years later somebody who told me that his father was the guy that injected the milk to my mother.
Wow.
And I met also another old woman that told me that one day she had somebody knocking at her door, and this was my mother with the hospital robe. So it is truth.
My gosh.
And later...
just pause on that for a second. Growing up in a home and you're hearing those stories, how does that shape you as a child?
As
you're imagining one day you're going to be doing these types of things, or it's behind you? Like what's?
No, it was part of who I am. It's believing also that we need to be strong. Israel used to be not only an idea, but a place to fight for, based on values. They believed in Jabotinsky, in not only in the rights of the Jewish people on the entire land, but also in equality to minorities and so on, these kind of Democrat liberal values. And my mother for many years used not to kiss us or hug us, and because she told a family friend, these children need to be strong.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
No, she loved us. It's fine,
yeah.
but it's not. I'm not
no,
missing
it was
something
an educational
here.
goal.
No, no,
it was an
no.
educational goal.
But it was this was the feeling, and both of them, when they just went out of the underground, when the State of Israel was established, a day after Ben Gurion read the Declaration of Independence, they got married. So they are the first couple that got married in the independent state of Israel.
Wow.
And you should know why I know that these are the first and not the third or the second.
Right.
Why is that?
Yeah, I don't know. Tell me.
It's Firat HaOmer. The state of Israel was established between Passover and Shavuot.
Wow.
So you
of course, that's when we have Yom Ha'atzmaut every year, is during the Omer. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So, so my grandmother, from my father's side, convinced the rabbi of Tel Aviv at the time. I don't know how, but she said something like there's going to be a war. It was clear that Israel is going to be under attack, and I want to know that my son is married.
Wow.
So he said they're married, and only 10 people, this was his condition.
Oh.
So Menachem Begin was there, and other friends from the Irgun.
Wow.
So just adding to all these stories, the fact that every Yom Ha'atzmaut we celebrated also the anniversary of my parents.
Wow.
So it was all connected, intertwined, you know, the idea of the country and their personal story and beliefs. And later also, Menachem Begin called my father and asked him to join politics, to Tnuat HaCherut, to the Likud. And I thought for many years that I would never, never, never join politics.
Why?
Because I saw, it was clear to me that I want to contribute to my country, but politics, looking at politics, you know, from inside, you know, it's politics. And my father was a very honest, and I mean, for him, it was not about being, in politics, but it was more about contributing to his country. He didn't adjust to all these political maneuvers, and therefore I found other ways to contribute. For a few years I was in the Mossad, and later I became a lawyer, practiced law, until the decision to join politics.
Are you allowed to talk about the Mossad? I know you were involved with Operation Bayonet, is what it said.
I was very, well, I was young, I was 20-something for 4 years. It was interesting, contributing.
And this was during the time of...
But I was not, you know, it was just serving. I also had some operational courses and so, but it's also part of who I am.
Sure. Sure, right, because I can imagine being around that, this sense of like you have to take action on the ground to protect the state of Israel, which is different, like you said, than politics, which is a whole different game almost to figure out.
Yes, but after many years I can say that everyone contributes in his or her own way. So when I was in the army, I was officer in the army, and later in the Mossad, and later serving in politics. I cannot say what is the moment or the years that I contributed the most, but I think that when you are in high positions in politics, being a foreign minister, making decisions on war and peace, well, this is something that you cannot compare to any other situation in life.
Wow. So let's talk about that. So how did you end up in politics, and talk about how that started? Because I know it was an interesting time also.
I was a lawyer, practiced law. I'm a good lawyer, by the way. And It was 1995, right after Oslo Agreement was signed, and Oslo Agreement were, the first time where there was an understanding between Israel and the Palestinians about recognizing each other's national aspiration. And I looked at these agreements, and the country Israel was divided, similar to today, by the way, when one camp called himself the Camp of the Land of Israel, speaking about the rights on the entire land. And I could feel the same, because I still remember my first visits after 6 days war. Yes, I'm that old. In Kever Rachel, in the Tomb of Rachel, and the Patriarch, and the Western Wall, of course. But yet it was clear to me that not less important is to keep the values of Israel as a Jewish democratic state, and we need to divide or give up part of the land. Okay, so I looked at the other side, the other camp, that was the peace camp. And in a way, they waited for the new Middle East to fall on our shoulders. And I said, okay, I read the agreement, the MOU, and I said, okay, this is not an agreement, it shapes some understandings for the future, but as a lawyer I said, okay, what is that? I would never give a client of mine the possibility to give the keys of his apartment if he sells it without getting the full consideration. The best thing is to negotiate a comprehensive, detailed peace agreement, and therefore I felt that I'm in between these camps. Now, these two camps, it was few weeks before the assassination of Rabin, so it was very emotional, and I felt that my voice is not being heard. That I don't want to choose whether I want to be here or there. Yes, I believe in the rights of the Jewish people, but I believe that in order to keep Israel, we need to give up part of our rights, but in a manner which gives Israel security, that keeps all the places that are important. And anyway, I thought that what I want to do, what I need to do, is to negotiate.
Beautiful. Let me just make sure I understand. So, again, this is Oslo Accords. For me, this is when I was growing up, by the way. Rabin's assassination is like my first memory of Israel. But this is, the time of Arafat and Clinton and Rabin on the Great Lawn, as they say here in America. I'm sorry, on the White House lawn. And you're saying there were in your mind, there were two camps. One was, it's about protecting as much of the real estate of Israel, the land of Israel. And on the other, it's about, let's try to pursue peace and let's give up land to get that peace. And you felt yourself in the middle, feeling like it's not about only the land, but it's not about, you felt like the side giving up land for peace was didn't really have a comprehensive plan to get there. And there needs to be like more strategy
to get there, to keep Israel's security, to make it detailed. Agreement, not just vague ideas that we believe happily ever after.
Right.
And
there was not, that voice was not there, you felt like? Okay.
No, that voice that says something like yes, but to both sides.
Right.
And
you call it the center probably or something, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, later during the years I became the leader of the biggest center parties in Israel, but yes, this is the meaning.
Sure.
And I decided to join politics. It was a one-day decision was made in Yom Kippur. Really, I looked at my children. They were 5 and 8 at the time, and I said, okay, what am I living, what kind of country? This is not a situation that I want to live them for the future. Unsolved.
Yeah. Wait, what does it mean to get into politics? You like call someone and say, I'm ready to be in politics? How do you?
Okay. Okay, so since my father was in the Likud, he died a few years before that, so he was not alive at the time. But I decided to join the primaries in Likud. It was clear to me that I will do it in the Likud, but I said also publicly that since Oslo Agreement were signed by a government that was democratically elected we should abide to and have better agreements in the future.
Democratic state, right?
Yes.
Front center.
And I decided to join the primaries.
Wait, can I ask you that also while we were there? Why? I know that the word democratic is an important piece for you. Why? Like, you know, they say like, you know, certain people study overseas, they spend time in America, they felt connected to democracy.
No.
You weren't hearing about democracy all morning in your house, I assume.
Yes, America is the biggest democracy in the world. I respect
you had parents that were radical, that were doing stuff.
My mentor is Jabotinsky, who is a Zionist leader that both my parents really believed. I grew up on his books and essays and speeches. And he described himself, his own personal definition was liberal and democrat.
Got it.
And it was not about system of election. It was about values. It was about equality. It was respecting the other.
So that became part of who you were.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so you brought that into politics.
Yes, and therefore, in politics, I joined because of the conflict and the need to solve it in a manner that I believe represent also Israel's values and interests, but also being Minister of Justice or representing these democratic values in a ministry that is, in a way, the light of the democratic values was important for me as well.
Wow. Okay, so then you get involved, and then Rabin is assassinated.
So I decided to join politics, but it was just a decision. Rabin was assassinated.
Doesn't happen overnight.
Yes, and later I was elected to the parliament in 1999.
Okay.
In the end.
So it took time. Okay, fine. So tell me a little bit. I know you've been at the forefront of so many different things. I'm trying to think about the best way to get at this. Let's first just talk about the different rounds of negotiation with the Palestinians that you were involved with, and kind of like, you know, how would you tell that story? I know the first round, Oslo, was before your time, kind of, but you had opinions about it.
Yes, of course.
But what came after that, and kind of, you know, what did you learn from each iteration? Like, bring me through that story.
After that, it was Camp David 2000. I was in the opposition, and Ehud Barak led these negotiations. And so I watched it from the outside. And I thought at the time, I don't know whether somebody still recalls this picture of Ehud Barak pushing Yasser Arafat to the cabin in Camp David.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I don't know if I know it. Okay.
I mean, it was a kind of, both of them tried to be polite for the cameras.
Yeah.
And one said, "Dear, you first," and it ended when they pushed him.
Really?
Yeah, something like this.
That's very funny.
And I said, yeah, well, I would not.
Yeah.
So I said to myself that this symbolically said something about a way of negotiations. Because I think that some Israelis thought that, okay, if we would have a Palestinian leader in the room, and we will be generous enough, they will sign an agreement. And it didn't happen in 2000. And really Bill Clinton, President Clinton invested time and effort, and I really respect him for that.
Why not?
And later instead, sorry?
Why didn't it happen?
Arafat didn't accept it, and the day after we got an intifada of buses exploding in Israeli, and so I thought maybe we need to have the negotiations in putting all the issues on the table, but instead of saying, okay, let's have principles agreement, like this was the attempt in Camp David, let's have more detailed, comprehensive. Maybe it will take more time during the negotiations, but it will give also time to leaders to absorb the meaning of every article, of the compromises that are needed. Maybe even the people would have more time to accept the compromises, and there are compromises on both sides.
That's super interesting. You're saying instead of kind of having like a, similar to Oslo, how you felt, instead of having like a big picture, let's just get the first part done and then we'll get to the details later. You're saying it doesn't make sense unless we actually have real details early on.
And it should be clear that when we say where the borders are, let's have a map and let's delineate the border, and it's important for me to know what will happen on the other side of the border. It's not just throwing the keys to the other side, hoping for good. I'm realistic. We live in a tough neighborhood.
You're a lawyer.
and I live in a tough neighborhood. So we need to know that the other side will be demilitarized state. So we need to deal with very complicated emotional issues at the same time. And that's how we enter to the next 2 rounds of negotiations.
Those are,
but frankly, I want to add something now, that since we didn't achieve a peace treaty with the Palestinians, after I didn't, and the other side was not willing to say yes. They didn't say no, but they didn't say yes. So for now, I think that anything that can be achieved toward this would be better than a situation when everything is open, lack of hope on both sides. I'm saying that at first, after Camp David 2000, I said, let's have
the details,
a detailed, comprehensive agreement. I'm saying that right now, when the situation is that,
like now today,
today, no hope for peace, and nothing is happening, and it looks like we are deteriorating to one-state reality, which is worst-case scenario for Israel. I think that everything that can be done in order to portray the road forward is important.
Anything. But again, your point before was kind of, if it doesn't work, then pretending doesn't help, I guess. But let's...
No, what I would like to say to Israelis or to your viewers, and I think that you would hear from a lot of Israelis saying, and sometimes rightly so, there is no partner on the other side.
That's a classic thing I've been taught since I was in middle school, right? We don't have a partner for peace, so we're never going to have peace. So just put it on the side. Don't worry about it.
Exactly. So my answer is the following. It's not about them. It's not about what the Palestinian wants. It's about us. When the State of Israel was established in 1948, in accordance to or after the United Nations resolution of... the Arabs didn't accept it. In fact, they started a war against Israel. But the Israeli establishment said, this is what we are going to do. And I think that this is the time for Israel to make its own decisions. And to be honest, in Israel, there are completely 2 different national GPS. One is mine and others. Our national GPS is keeping the State of Israel as secured Jewish democratic state. Jewish democratic state means nation state for the Jewish people, with equal rights to all its citizens, without discrimination, as is written in the Declaration of Independence. And in order to keep Israel as a Jewish democratic state, I need to have a Jewish majority, because without it, Israel will... Okay. So I'm moving forward. This is my destination in my car.
That's where you want to go. Secure, Jewish, democratic. Those are the 3.
And I hope to stop in the peace station and to find somebody that is willing to make an agreement that keeps all the parameters that are important for me, and is willing to the compromises that are needed. But assuming that nobody is waiting for me, okay? I'm not changing my GPS. I'm not changing my direction, destination. Traffic jam, okay, I can wait for a while, I can find other roads to reach the same destination. I'm not putting obstacles on my way. The other national GPS that is being represented in Israel, and not only, it's more about, it's Greater Israel, it's the land of Israel, it's a Jewish state from a religious perspective, nationalistic in a way, but more religious. And democracy turns from set of values into system of election, that majority rules.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the real debate in Israel. And while they are pushing to one direction that will make it very difficult to reach peace in the future. So it is first and foremost what we would like to achieve. Mm-hmm. And if there is no partner on the other side, it's a problem. It's not, okay, that's fine, we don't have a partner, now we can occupy the entire part between Jordan River and Mediterranean Sea. No, it's not true. Right. Let's define what is our goals, and then let's see what we can do with the other side.
Got it. So I'm thinking back to what you said about Oslo, where you felt like there were these two camps. One was, you know, get as much land as possible, or protect as much land as possible, and the other was give up land for peace, even though we're not really sure how we're going to get to peace, and there needs to be a constructive plan in the middle. And now, you know, now there's a GPS where it sounds like we're down to two camps now, right? There's the.
No, I think that.
Have you fallen into the camp that was, we'll figure it out later, but let's just keep doing the right thing, or you feel like you're still somewhere in the middle where there's like a real way to get from A to Z, or Aleph to Tav?
I think that what is missing now in Israel, I think that the obvious of 48 is not the obvious anymore.
Okay.
It's not only that Israel is misunderstood from the outside world, mm-hmm. but also within Israel. Because for many years it was clear, yes, the Declaration of Independence, Jewish democratic state, it was clear that it's not from a religious perspective. I mean, there are the religious ultra-Orthodox in Israel that for them it's halachic state, right. But vast majority in Israel supported the idea of nation state for the Jewish people. We have the rights to keep our nation state, right. To keep it secured, and democracy. It was clear that all the institutions that are keeping Israel as a democracy, the judicial system and everything, the constitutional and equality is part of it. Mm-hmm. But during the years, without noticing in a way, this debate was underneath the surface. Mm-hmm. It was also about what is the source of authority for our life. Mm-hmm. Is it the law, or we don't have a real constitution, but maybe right. The Declaration of Independence and the Supreme Court is the interpreter, or is it the halacha? Mm-hmm. And the rabbi is the one that gives.
Sure.
And it was underneath the surface, and now it is exploding.
Right.
And therefore, I believe that when I call Israelis saying, let's go back to base, mm-hmm. and the base is the Declaration of Independence. Sure. It's not about us and the Palestinians yet. Mm-hmm. It's about who we are.
Sure.
And this was basically also when the demonstrations against the judicial reforms. This was I was the first one who gave a speech there, calling, let's go back to the Declaration of Independence. That's it.
Right.
It's not about the Arabs. It's not about the Palestinians. It's about us. It's clear to me that if I believe in equal rights within the state of Israel, I need to keep the Jewish majority and accept the concept of dividing ourselves from the Palestinians into two states. But it's not about giving the Palestinians something, but it's about keeping Israel in accordance to our values.
Which is, it's a hard thing to do by yourself, I think.
For a while, oh yes. At first, I spoke about it in politics. Mm-hmm. For a while, I felt that I'm a lonely voice. Mm-hmm. But this is just before quitting politics, because for many years I had the support. I was the biggest party of the parliament. Yeah. But and when we had the demonstrations against the judicial reforms, I felt, okay, a new camp is emerging in Israel.
Sure.
And I felt so hopeful that this will turn into an understanding not only who we are, but what is the policy, what are the steps that need to be taken. And then October 7th.
So before we go to October 7th, just so I was thinking about what you said about kind of is it a Jewish state that's founded not on Torah, let's say, or is it a religious state? And I was thinking of, at least as we imagine it based on reading Tanakh, the Jewish Bible, there was kind of a checks and balances, right? So you had like the king and like the melech, and then you had like the priestly class, the kohanim, and then you had like the nevi'im, or let's call them the rabbis, the religious leaders, and they kind of were all in conversation with each other. In America, of course, we have the three branches that are in conversation. Yeah. So, before we move to October 7th, in your mind, what would be, what is the ideal Supreme Court power? What should be the power of the Supreme Court? Or what should be? I'll make it bigger. The Supreme Court, the Prime Minister, the legislators, and the religious leaders. How should they be in conversation with each other?
In a way, firstly, we are speaking about three pillars to Israel's democracy, saying that we have the Supreme Court and the government and the parliament. Mm-hmm. But it's not true because, and I'm quoting Menachem Begin now, the parliament, the government is elected by the parliament, but parliament is doing whatever the government wants. We have coalition, so. Right. When you look at members of the Israeli Knesset, the Israeli parliament, when they vote, it's not really their own personal decision. Right. The way they vote is being agreed upon in the government right. by the different fractions of the government, the coalition.
Right.
And therefore, there are two: those that were elected in a way by the public, meaning the parliament and the government. And on the other side, the gatekeepers, mm-hmm. that includes the Supreme Court, but not only. What we call the gatekeepers within the government, the legal advisor, sure. the legal advisor to the government, the legal advisors within the ministries. And in the last few years, there was an attack on them by the politicians. Mm-hmm. Saying we were elected to make decisions, don't stop us. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying no, their role is to represent the public interest mm-hmm. and to stop irresponsible or corrupted politicians mm-hmm. from doing whatever they want. Mm-hmm. And that's why it was so important to speak about this, because these were the moments where I discovered that for some, democracies majority rules without checks and balances, without the entire judicial establishment say, well, that's enough, you cannot do these kind of things. And that's why it was also very important for me when the nation bill was voted for in Israel, saying that Israel is the nation state for the Jewish people. I said that's fine to declare it and to have this in a basic law, but put the other side of the equation. Right. And this is equal rights to all its citizens. Mm-hmm. In a way, I believe in being the hyphen between these two
values. This is a theme that's coming up for you a little bit.
And the more the politicians are trying to destroy, in a way, the judicial establishment and the gatekeepers. If I need to choose a side, and sometimes this is the situation, I want to be to be the guardian mm-hmm. of the legal advisor, of the Attorney General, to keep them independent and to keep their possibility to say no to the politicians when needed.
That's right, okay.
And we are facing an internal process that is acting against them and against the free press and all this, not symbols, but these institutions of democracy.
Okay. All right, and then all of a sudden we have October 7th. Yeah. Right, so everyone was protesting in the streets, people were at each other, and now we have October 7th, and yeah. It's a whole different thing. So I want to hear a little bit, we alluded to the fact that you've been at the front lines, you were involved with the withdrawal from Gaza, right? All those elements, and then we have this experience. Kind of for you, what have you learned since October 7th? I guess that's my first question. I know that's not the typical question. I know everyone wants to ask, where were you on October 7th? I'm asking, what have you learned? I know it's been a year. We're coming up on a year.
Since you've mentioned the disengagement, I want to make it clear. I supported the disengagement, and I think that it was the right thing to do. But during all these years, I've tried to preach for or to promote a policy that is based on two pillars. I was against letting Hamas participate in the elections in 2005. I tried to convince the Americans to forbid it. Mm-hmm. I said that there is no country or constitution in the world that gives a terrorist organization the possibility to abuse the democratic system for their own needs. I said they need to choose between ballots or bullets.
Right.
By the way, it's true to Hamas and to Hezbollah. And after Hamas took over Gaza, I said, okay, we need to act against them. Militarily, I support every military operation against them. Mm-hmm. But simultaneously, we need to work with the more pragmatics, those that I didn't achieve peace with, but they are cooperating with Israel on Israel's security in Yehuda v'Shomron, in the West Bank. They accept the right of Israel to exist.
Sure.
And therefore, we should strengthen them instead of strengthening Hamas.
Sure.
And the policy in the last few years was completely the opposite. And therefore...
Wait, how so? How was Hamas strengthened? How was Hamas strengthened?
Hamas was strengthened because in order to achieve quiet days, Israel enabled Qatar to transfer them money. It was for the people, but they use it. I mean, they got all this money, and instead of having giving it to the Palestinians, they use it to their weapon, to build all these unbelievable tunnels underneath Gaza. So while the people in Gaza are suffering, they use it for their own terrorist needs.
But allowing that money to flow through kept the border quieter, is what you're saying?
Yes. But
for the short term.
Yes, it was for the short term, and gave them, the army had the false perception they don't have an interest to express their vicious, horrific jihadist ideology. And meanwhile, and this is my criticism of the government, meanwhile, instead of working or strengthening the legitimate Palestinian Authority, that is too weak, corrupted, everything. And I can criticize them, but in choosing between them or Hamas,
right,
which is not only a terrorist organization, Hamas doesn't represent any legitimate cause of the Palestinians. It's a jihadist group. I would like, if I may, to mention something else about Gaza that unfortunately less and less people remember. When we left Gaza Strip, dismantled the settlements and evacuated Israeli civilians, and decided to pull out our forces, and Hamas won the election, we convinced, I was foreign minister at the time, we convinced the entire international community that any Palestinian government who wants to get legitimacy needs to accept the right of Israel to exist, to renounce violence and terrorism, and to abide to Oslo agreements. Now, those outside of Israel calling Hamas freedom fighters, they are not just because of the atrocities against civilians, but because Gaza could have been completely free and open just by renouncing violence and terrorism instead of using it. So, when you ask me, October 7th didn't change my basic positions, and I'm so sorry that some of the Israelis would translate. I can understand it emotionally because all of us are still under a trauma. But I criticize those that are saying that, you know, now all the Palestinians, everything is the same, all the Palestinians. We need to find, I think our responsibility is to find out if within we can find a group that is not Zionist, but represent a national conflict with us, unlike the religious conflict.
Great.
Because if the conflict turns into a religious conflict, it's unsolvable, we are doomed.
Great, so let's talk about that. I was going to ask you that. So I think, you know, one of the things that's happened in liberal circles in America, I should say, is that a sense that people kind of had this liberal mindset that at the end of the day, people want to have, you know, a house, maybe with a lawn, their children should be healthy, they should raise them, they should go to school, they should have kind of, you know, like, let's call it like striving for a middle class life or something like that. And that at the end of the day, when you're negotiating with another side in a conflict, if you can lay out a path that will get them there, they will be interested in doing that. And I think that there's been a little bit of a hit in the face, which is like, okay, not everyone feels that way.
I didn't think this was not the way I thought even before October 7.
Right, and you alluded to religious war versus national war. So talk about it.
Because I'm a Jew. For many years, many years, my people lived in different places all over the world, but still thinking about this dream of coming back to the land of Israel. My grandparents from both sides came to Israel in 1925. So thinking that, or putting aside national aspirations or religious ideology, I don't think that we can erase it just saying, okay, we give you some money and you have better life.
Right.
And therefore, I never thought that it would be enough. But I think also now that there are those that for them, having an answer to their national aspiration in a state of their own, this can, during the years, I don't think that this will happen, you know, in a day. This can turn into something positive. But if the ideology, religious conflict are not about your legitimate or about your cause, or it's about depriving the other from their right to express their beliefs in a different, on their faith. So Hamas, and this is all something that those that are saying, but you need to negotiate or to work with Hamas. No way, there is no hope for peace with them. That should be clear. Because they do not accept the right of Israel to exist. It's not about the occupation.
Right.
But on the other hand, we need to understand that there are those that they accept the right of Israel to exist, but they are still, the conflict is based on their national aspiration.
Got it. So would you say that it is a religious war at this point?
Sorry?
Would you say that it has become a religious war at this point, or for some people it's a religious war? Like, how do you think about that?
For some on both sides, by the way.
Right.
Of course, I would not compare, because what Hamas did is really...
Right.
But yes, when I see, if the focus would be on Temple Mount, it can turn into a religious war like this, a regional religious war.
Right.
Iran, it's turned into, Iran expresses or using terror as far as their own religious ideology. The good news is that it's not just against Israel, and it's against all the others that are more moderates, even Islamists. And
so let me ask you on that.
One sense, so this creates also opportunities, because we can form allies and alliances in the region in an understanding that the real enemy, unlike what used to be dozens of years ago, it's Iran and its proxies in the region and not Israel. And it's quite obvious now after the Abraham Accords.
Right. So that's another thing that kind of was going around at some point here, which people were kind of saying, you know, this is a war between Iran and America, and Israel and Gaza are kind of like a proxy stuck in the middle, and they're, you know, they're doing the suffering, but these are bigger countries behind them that are actually...
It's both.
Yeah.
It's both. It's both. Israel represents also what America represents, what the U.S. represents. The first question was about the U.S. as representing the democratic values and liberal values. So yes, so for Iran is a threat to the region and a threat to the world. And Israel represents this the same values in the Middle East, but it's not only. I mean, when it comes to Hamas, yes, they are being supported by Iran, but these are Sunni, these are Shia. It's not exactly the same. It's clear that about Hezbollah, that they abuse the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and they want to portray themselves as the saviors of the Palestinians. I mean, while we are talking, Israel is under attack from Lebanon by Hezbollah. Well, we attack them back, but for no reason. We have no conflict with Lebanon. But Hezbollah, as the proxy of Iran, decided to join after October 7th and to attack Israel.
So two questions on that. First, so let's talk about the North for a minute. We talked a little bit about, let's say, the South and what is possible or not possible there. You know, give me what's, you know, we'll be optimistic for a moment. What's possible in the northern border? What could it look like, and what should it look like, and how might we get there?
What I've said about what you call the South, it's true also about the North. Against terror, there's a need to act in military way. But yet, after the second war in Lebanon, I initiated the United Nations Resolution 1701 that pushed Hezbollah after the Litani River, kilometers from, dozens of kilometers from the northern Israeli border. We had an arms embargo on Hezbollah, and this is all something that the international community failed to do during all these years, because at first it worked, and international forces entered into Lebanon. But then what happened is exactly what I was afraid of before, that they joined, Hezbollah now is part of the Lebanese government. In the past, we can work with the legitimate Lebanese government in the past. The US and France and others could work with them against, and to form a decision against Hezbollah that Iran described at the time as a defeat to Hezbollah. Now the situation changed. Until now, the US tried to re-find or redraft the same resolution, or even less better to Israel, frankly. They didn't accept it. It's clear that if we stop the war in Gaza, they will stop, but this is not enough, because it's clear that what they were doing all these years is portraying or having plans how to infiltrate into Israel through tunnels. Well, basically what Hamas did in October 7th was Hezbollah's plan to do in the northern part. So we need to have more. So what Israel now is doing is weakening the infrastructure of terror of Hezbollah without another alternative. Israel tried to reach a political understanding, forcing them to pull out or to leave the adjacent part of South Lebanon to the Israeli border without any success. So let's see, maybe after what they are facing from Israel in the military attack and the success that we are having, maybe this will force them, convince them to take the other position in pushing their forces kilometers from the Israeli border. And hopefully they will be much more weak now.
Right. And I guess it sounds like you're saying the hope in both scenarios, both in Gaza and in Lebanon, is certainly to I don't know, you can't defeat, you can't totally remove these people, these terrorist forces, but to create a scenario where they are less militarily equipped or disincentivized, and people other than them are somehow ascending to political power.
But in order to have others, well, at first Hezbollah is a direct proxy of Iran. So without dealing with Iran, they will continue, that's for sure. And this is another international goal for the international community to deal with Iran. But for now, we need a period of time that it's clear that they will not and cannot implement their plans, terror plans against Israel. It's very important what you said about this kind of war, because it's what we call asymmetrical war. It's a war of a country against terrorist organizations. And we are looking for victory. Israelis now, especially after October 7th, are looking for 6 days war, you know, this kind of heroic victory. But 6 days war and Yom Kippur war was between countries. And it's completely different when the war is against a terrorist organization, because while we are looking for victory, they are looking for survival. So at the end of the day, one terrorist can get out of the tunnel and say, I won, and recreate and rebuild this terrorist organization. So it's not less important to make it impossible or very difficult for the remains of this terrorist organization to rebuild themselves. And therefore, when it comes to Gaza, I do believe that it's very important to replace Hamas as an organization. And I would call, or I believe that the role of the international community now, I wish there was a plan, okay? The US, Egypt, Jordan, Emirates, Qatar, maybe the Saudis, putting a plan on the table, saying, okay, it's not acceptable that Hamas will remain in power. No way. And therefore, we will work with the weak Palestinian Authority. We will give Israel the legitimacy to act against terror within Gaza Strip when needed, but it will take time, but we will help the Palestinian Authority to replace Hamas. And meanwhile, the international community will take care on the humanitarian situation of the people in Gaza. You can ask, why should Hamas say yes to this? Because for now, it's Hamas, it's Sinwar and Netanyahu, Hamas and Israel. So it's easier for Hamas to say to the people in Gaza, maybe, not maybe, you are suffering, but this is the resistance, it's against Israel.
Sure.
But if all these countries coming together, and Egypt, for example, would be willing to work with Israel in building an under the ground wall to stop the infiltration. And there's a list of detailed
it's all about details.
Things, yes, again, that need to be done and agreed upon. And I'm so sorry that for almost a year we don't have this kind of plan.
Right.
Because this could have turned the situation, and the most important thing, that this can lead also to the release of the hostages. Because without bringing them home, well, October 7th will be an Israeli trauma for many years, but the need to bring the hostages back is so essential for us as a society. Part of the solidarity of who we are.
So it might be obvious, but I want to ask it to you anyway. I know that when you were in Ehud Olmert's cabinet, you had the opportunity to negotiate for the release of Gilad Shalit and did not, right? And
we negotiated and didn't accept it.
Didn't accept. Sorry, you negotiated but did not accept the offer. Correct.
Yes.
So just so we understand here, why is it different? Why is it different this time than that time?
Okay, you're right. because I thought at the time that the demands of Hamas, including releasing Sinwar,
right.
I mean, look what happened
of
with
course.
this guy. So I don't want to underestimate or undermine what some are saying, that we need to take care of Israel's security, and it's not just thinking about the hostages. But first, we are speaking about not only, but also civilians that were taken from our homes. We are speaking about the situation where, frankly, the Israeli army failed in guarding these families. But what I suggested, and this is more important, I don't think that the real choice is between releasing the hostages and a defeat and making the war and a victory maybe without the hostages. Firstly, I don't think that there is a real victory without the hostages, but it's not just a moral issue. What I put on the table now gives an answer to everything, because after a year, Hamas is the infrastructure of terror were ruined by Israel, and rightly so. The other two goals of the war were to release the prisoners and to topple Hamas regime. In order, you cannot topple a regime without replacing him. And therefore, what I suggest, put everything together, including the release of the hostages, so you don't need to choose, we have both.
Right.
But frankly, what I suggest goes in line with my vision that there are on the Palestinian side some very weak but pragmatic forces. So while others in Israel would portray all of them the same and not willing to do so. So if the option to the day after would be to keep Israel in Gaza or to keep Hamas in Gaza, these are very bad options for Israel. And therefore replacing Hamas is essential, and as part of this, the release of the hostages can be part of it. But or any, frankly, I would support any deal to release the hostages right now. But when we are speaking, it looks like maybe it's on the table, but the voices are not optimistic now about it. I wish it was.
I want to shift a little bit. I want to ask you an insider question, if that's okay. So one thing that we've noticed here in America, I know that your expertise is more Israel than America, but I know you've worked with serious American politicians over the years, to put it lightly. Yes. You know, we have this, you know, on the ground, there's a sense of a swelling after October 7th of anti-Semitism, anti-Israel. And then I know there's probably different conversations that are happening at the, you know, political level. Looking back on your career and spending time with Condoleezza Rice and people like that, were there moments where it felt like the conversation happening in the media and on the ground was one whole thing, but the conversation you were having with the American government was totally different?
Well, I worked with two different administrations. I worked with the Republican administration, with Condoleezza Rice and President Bush, and I worked with Obama and Secretary Kerry. And we could have, and we had discussions, and sometimes very tough discussions or disagreement about issues, but it was always very discreet in closed doors. And it is important not just to keep the relations, but also I think that the relations with the US are part of Israel deterrence. And the more on the outside it looks like that there are problems in these relations, our enemies are looking for it. Even after October 7th, when Iran is looking at Israel and they see the carriers of the US coming to the region, and the US president saying, don't, this is important.
Right.
I think that what we see now is more problematic. So I think that some, from my perspective, red lines were crossed by some of Israeli leaders, frankly. in respecting the role, in not respecting the role of the US in Israel's security and deterrence.
We'll leave it at that. Okay, so my last question, moving off of that finally is, it's been 1 year. Share a message of hope. In America, we need the optimism here. What's your, with the American audience, what's your message of hope for us looking forward?
First, we were speaking about the trauma in Israel, but looking at the solidarity of the world Jewry. Well, our heart was broken during and after October 7th, but yet it was so overwhelming and warm, and to see the love and the support that we got from the Jewish communities. And I know that it was not easy because of the rise of anti-Semitism. So maybe it would have been easier for some to say, okay, I disconnect from Israel. But the opposite happened. And this is highly respected in Israel. And I think that this is something that gives hope, and the understanding that we are together in this, no matter what. And so this is one thing. I do believe that there is a way out of this. I'm outside of politics, so I've just portrayed what can be done. So while we are talking, Hamas is weaker, Hezbollah is weaker. The real question is whether we can turn it into opportunity. I believe that there is an opportunity, but it depends on political decisions in Israel as well, and by the United States, and all together how to create, how to seize the moment of opportunity instead of just, in a way, sinking into the sorrow and it's not about, it's, we will all remember what happened, but now we should think about how we can get out stronger with hope for, I was speaking about my children when I decided to join politics, so now I have a grandson, and this is the minimum that we owe these young people. And also in Israel we found really these young people that join the army, that were drafted, that are willing really to sacrifice themselves for Israel security, volunteering. It's really amazing. It's so yes, I believe that there is a hope, but it depends on the decisions that will be made to turn it into this vague hope into real opportunity for peace. And not less important also to watch the situation in the region, the countries that signed an agreement, the agreements and the normalizations with Israel in accordance to Abraham Accords. They understand who's the bad and the problematics in the region, understanding that we should stand together. So there are some opportunities.
All right. Hopefully we'll have good news for the hostages, and good news for the Jewish people, and good news for Israel. And I hope to have you back on when we can discuss all the things you described coming to life.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. Thank you so much, Tzipi.
Thank you.